right, strap in, everyone. We're diving deep into Get Out today. You guys really wanted this one, and trust me, it's way more than just your average horror flick. It's become a real cultural phenomenon, and we've got this awesome critique that breaks down why that is.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the more than just horror thing. Get Out does this incredible job of blending like edge of your seat thrills with really sharp social commentary. It makes you think, you know? It's not just mindless entertainment.
Definitely not. And this critique we've got here calls the script a marvel of precision and layered storytelling. What is it about the writing that makes it so special?
Well, it's how Jordan Peele sets things up. I mean, on the surface, you've got this classic horror setup. Black guy meets his white girlfriend's family for the first time. Sounds familiar, right? But Peele uses this to dig into something much deeper, something way more insidious. It's about how racism is baked into the system, even in those circles that consider themselves liberal.
It's like he's using the horror genre to sneak in this powerful message,
Yeah.
like a Trojan horse.
Exactly. A Trojan horse of social commentary. You're drawn in by the suspense and the creepy vibes, but then bam, Peele hits you with these hard truths about race in America. It's like unsettling, but brilliant at the same time.
So there's this phrase that comes up in the critique, the superficial politeness of liberal racism. I think we need to unpack that a bit. What does it mean?
Think about Rose's parents, the Armitages. They're all welcoming to Chris on the surface, right? They even brag about voting for Obama. But if you look closer, their actions tell a different story. It's like this kind of racism that hides behind smiles and niceties, but it's still about power and control over Black individuals.
So it's not about outright hate. It's about this more subtle, almost sneaky power dynamic.
That's exactly it. And Get Out shines a light on that hidden reality, which honestly can be really uncomfortable to watch. It makes you confront things about yourself and the society we live in that you might rather ignore.
And then there's that twist. Oh, man. I remember watching it for the first time. My jaw was on the floor.
Right. It completely changes the game. When you find out what the Armitages are really up to, the way Peele uses that to symbolize how Black people have been commodified, like turned into objects throughout history, it's chilling. He's saying, hey, this isn't just a horror movie. This stuff is real and it's messed up.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Now, the critique also goes on and on about Daniel Kaluuya's performance as Chris.
Yeah.
Why does his performance stand out so much?
Kaluuya is a master of nuance, you know? You watch Chris go from this calm, collected guy to someone who's absolutely terrified as he realizes the situation he's in. Remember that scene where he gets hypnotized and there's that single tear rolling down his face?
Yeah, such a powerful image.
Yeah.
But is there more to it than just great acting? I mean, is it symbolic?
Honestly, I think it's both. Kaluuya is an incredible actor, no doubt. But that pair, it also represents this loss of control, this loss of self, like when you feel completely trapped and powerless. It's a really visceral way to show that.
That feeling of being trapped, it's definitely amplified by the whole Sunken Place thing, right? Can you explain that for anyone who hasn't seen the film?
So the Sunken Place, it's this terrifying, surreal place where Chris's mind goes during the hypnosis. Imagine being stuck in this dark void, totally paralyzed, unable to move or even speak, and the worst part, you're forced to watch as someone else controls your body. It's like a nightmare come to life.
Chills, just thinking about it. And the film is making a connection between that and how Black voices have been silenced throughout history, right?
That's it. The Sunken Place isn't just some random scary idea. It becomes this powerful metaphor for how Black people have been systematically marginalized and silenced. It's a visual representation of being trapped within a system that wants to take away your power and your voice.
So the horror isn't just about being physically trapped. It's about the psychological and societal implications as well.
Exactly. And Peele uses that to explore this very real, very disturbing reality that a lot of Black individuals face this constant feeling of being unheard, unseen, and basically not valued in a society that prioritizes white voices.
Now, the critique also talks about Allison Williams as Rose. How does her performance add to this unsettling atmosphere?
Allison Williams does a phenomenal job. At first, Rose seems like the perfect girlfriend, supportive, loving, all that. But as things go on, her true nature starts to show, and it's chilling. She becomes this symbol of complicity, benefiting from a system that oppresses others while looking all innocent and harmless.
Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, but one that actively takes part in the hunt.
Yeah, you got it. And that duality makes her character even more disturbing. She represents the danger of people who say they're allies, but in the end, their actions prop up harmful systems.
And we can't forget her parents, right? Catherine Keener and Bradley Whitford as the Armitages. They just ooze this creepy vibe. even though they're all smiles on the surface.
It's like their outward appearance is completely at odds with their real intentions, and that's what makes them so effective. They embody this whole superficial politeness of liberal racism thing we talked about. They might embrace diversity in words, but their actions tell a different story.
There's that line, I would have voted for Obama a third time. It's supposed to be reassuring, but it just comes off as so creepy.
Yeah, it's like they're trying way too hard to convince Gris and the audience that they're on his side, but their actions speak louder than words, and that's what makes it so unsettling. And that's the genius of Peele's directing, you know? He takes these little details, these things that seem normal at first, and uses them to build this feeling like something's off, like you're being lulled into this false sense of security before the real horror hits you.
This critique, it talks about how Peele mixes suspense with satire. So it's not just about scaring you, it's about using humor to point out these uncomfortable truths. How does he pull that off?
Well, look at how he flicks classic horror tropes on their head. For example, the movie starts with a black man being the victim, which right away challenges what we usually see in horror, right?
So he's taking these familiar horror stories and using them to show us something about race and how it plays out in the real world.
Exactly. It forces you to think about your own assumptions about race and who's really vulnerable. And he does all of this while still making a genuinely scary and suspenseful movie. It's a tough balance to strike, but Peele nails it.
Oh, and the visuals, the deer, the sunken place, they add so much to the story. What's the deal with the deer, for instance?
You know that opening scene where the deer gets hit by a car? That's not just there for shock value. It's foreshadowing, hinting at what's to come for Chris, and this feeling of being hunted that runs through the whole film. The deer, it becomes this symbol of lost innocence and the danger hiding beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect community.
It's like a visual metaphor for how Black people are often targeted and victimized.
Right. You got it. That deer motif reinforces this idea of being preyed upon, of being seen as an object instead of a person. It adds this whole other layer to how the film explores race and power dynamics.
We've touched on the sunken place a bit, but this critique really gets into how the visuals emphasize that sense of entrapment. What are your thoughts on that?
The Sunken Place isn't just a concept, it's a visual masterpiece. Peele uses all these camera tricks, like close-ups and these really long takes, to show us how isolated and powerless Chris feels.
So the way it's filmed actually contributes to that feeling of being trapped.
Absolute. The way the camera just sits on Chris's face as he sinks into that darkness, you see the terror in his eyes, and it's just amplified. Peele uses the camera to really punch you in the gut with the emotion of that scene.
And this connects back to silencing Black voices throughout history, right?
Exactly. It's like you said before, the Sunken Place isn't just this random horror device. It's this powerful visual metaphor for being silenced, being forced to watch as you're exploited, but unable to do anything about it.
This critique also points out how effectively Peele uses sound to create this feeling of unease. What are some of the examples that stand out to you?
The sound design in Get Out is brilliant. Remember the music at the beginning? Those haunting Swahili lyrics?
Yeah, that's a really cool detail. How does that tie into the whole racial tension thing going on in the movie?
Those lyrics, they're actually a warning about danger, like foreshadowing the threat that Chris is going to face from the Armitage family. It's a subtle cue that things aren't what they seem, especially for a Black man entering this, like, white liberal world.
So it's not just a creepy soundtrack, it's actually part of the story, like a warning sign.
Right. It adds to this feeling of dread and emphasizes the racial tension bubbling beneath the surface. And it's not just the music either. Peele also uses silence, like these moments of complete quiet that make the tension almost unbearable.
Yeah, silence can be scarier than any loud noise sometimes. It makes you hold your breath, waiting for something bad to happen.
Exactly. Peele uses that silence to keep the audience on edge, always wondering what's going to happen next. It's such a smart way to amp up the suspense and the psychological horror of the film.
Now, the cinematography by Toby Oliver, there's something about the color palette that the critique mentions, this kind of muted look. How does that fit into the film's overall atmosphere?
The colors are so important in setting the mood, you know? Notice how Peele uses these muted colors, almost like draining the warmth out of everything, especially in the Armitage family's house.
So even the visuals are telling us something about the characters and their intentions.
Totally. It's like the house is a reflection of the Armitages themselves, cold, calculated. The lack of warmth in the colors mirrors how they really feel about Chris. It's subtle, but it works to make you feel uneasy and foreshadow the danger that's coming.
There are also those moments where it feels like the film is dropping hints about the horrors to come, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Like when Chris is taking pictures with his phone and the flash makes Georgina, the maid, have this sudden moment of clarity. It's like a glimpse of her true self breaking through. Those little hints. They're warnings for both Chris and the audience, but they're easy to miss if you're not paying close attention.
It's those little details that make you want to rewatch Get Out, you know?
Yeah.
You catch something new each time, like there's always another layer to discover.
Exactly. It's not just a simple horror movie, it's this complex exploration of race, identity, and how insidious prejudice can be.
Out of all the things we've discussed about Get Out, what would you say is the most important thing for viewers to take away?
The biggest takeaway for me is that racism isn't always this in-your-face aggressive thing. It can be subtle, it can hide behind good intentions, and it can even disguise itself as politeness. Get Out makes you confront those uncomfortable truths and look at your own biases, even the ones you might not realize you have.
So it's a call to be more aware of how racism shows up in everyday life, even in those subtle ways.
Exactly. It's a challenge to look beyond the surface, to question those seemingly harmless behaviors or comments that actually contribute to a much bigger system of oppression.
It's also amazing how art can be used to start these important conversations about social issues, isn't it?
Get Out is a perfect example of that. It's a horror movie that's both entertaining and makes you think. It pushes us to have those tough conversations about race and representation.
And its impact goes way beyond just starting conversations, right? This movie was a huge success and even won an Oscar.
Get Out was a cultural phenomenon. It resonated with people from all walks of life. Critics loved it for its originality, its bold message, and just how well made it is. It even won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay, which was a huge deal for Jordan Peele and for horror movies in general.
It really shows how powerful storytelling can be. It crosses genres and connects with people on a deeper level.
Absolutely. Get Out proved that horror movies can be more than just jump scares and gore. They can be a powerful way to talk about social issues and explore complicated ideas in a way that's engaging and thought-provoking.
We've explored the amazing script, the incredible performances, Peele's masterful directing, the thought-provoking themes, and how much of an impact Get Out has had. What else can we uncover in this deep dive? We were talking about how Peele turns those traditional horror tropes upside down. Can you give us some specific examples of how he does that?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most obvious is right at the start. Instead of the classic helpless white woman as the victim, it's a black man who gets abducted in the suburbs. It immediately flips the script on us, setting the tone for the whole movie.
Yeah, it makes you question your own assumptions about who's really in danger. And it forces us to think about the very real problem of racial violence and how black people are so often targeted.
Exactly. And another thing is how Peele uses humor. Horror movies will often use humor to break the tension, but in Get Out, it's also this sharp tool for satire. Like that scene where Rose's dad is trying way too hard to connect with Chris by talking about hip-hop? It's funny, but it also points out how performative some white allyship can be, almost like it's offensive because it's so fake.
Yeah, it's that awkwardness, that trying too hard to be cool, that just highlights how prejudiced they really are.
Right. Peele is so good at using those moments of humor to expose the ridiculousness of racial stereotypes and how white people often try to act like racism isn't a real problem.
And it's not just the story and the characters that are challenging expectations. It's the way the movie is made, too. The critique mentions how cinematography and sound design are used to make the audience feel uneasy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Think about the way the movie is shot. Toby Oliver, the cinematographer, uses these long, unbroken shots and these slow camera movements that create this feeling of dread. It's like the camera is stalking Chris, reflecting that feeling he has of being watched and hunted.
Yeah, you really feel like you're right there with him, experiencing his paranoia.
Exactly. And then there's the sound design. You've got all these creepy sounds, doors creaking, voices whispering, the cicadas constantly chirping in the background. It all adds to the sense of danger and tension.
It's like the sound itself becomes this character, always reminding you that something bad is about to happen.
You said it. All of those elements come together to create this immersive experience, one that you won't forget easily.
So we've really gotten into the heart of Get Out, exploring it from all these different angles. What would you say is the most important message the film is trying to get across? What should people be thinking about after watching it?
At its core, I think Get Out is showing us how insidious racism really is. It's not always obvious. It can be woven into every part of society. It's a movie that makes us confront our own prejudices and really look at the world we live in, even the ugly parts.
It's definitely not just a movie. It's a wake-up call.
Exactly. And even though it focuses on the experience of Black people in America, the themes of social injustice and how dangerous it is to just sit back and do nothing, they speak to everyone, regardless of who you are or where you come from.
This deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least. We've talked about the brilliant writing, the powerful acting, how skillfully Peele directs, those thought-provoking themes, and the lasting impact Get Out has had on our culture.
It's definitely a movie that keeps the conversation going, pushing us to think critically about race and how we see each other.
As we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to really chew on, something to consider as they go back to the film or think about its message.
Definitely. Here's a question. How do the anxieties and fears that Get Out explores connect to the anxieties and fears we have in society today? What parallels can you see between what happens in the movie and the real-world problems we face when it comes to race, identity, and fighting for social justice?
That's a powerful question, and one that I hope all of you will spend some time reflecting on. As you continue to explore Jordan Peele's work, pay attention to how he uses these different genres, like horror, to reveal those darker aspects of humanity and force us to confront truths about ourselves and the world around us.
Keep those questions coming, keep exploring these ideas, and never stop diving deep.
Until next time.